The Great Recession is still casting a long shadow on the North American economy, while Canada appears on sounder footing. The OECD has warned of a stalling economy and housing bubble, all while our biggest partner grapples with its own recovery and internal political challenges. Here now to give us a picture of the North American outlook, Don Coxe, chair of Coxe Advisors LLP, and we're happy to have you back in that seat.
Pleasure.
All the way in from the Windy City, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good stuff. We're going to talk about the challenges that Canada and the United States have, but first I want to play a little clip from the interview we just did with Diane Francis, because we're going to start with resources, and we'll play this tape and then come back and chat. Roll tape, please.
I want Canadians to think about their existential crisis looming. They have a north they cannot defend and cannot develop, and the world is not going to let us keep it a park. It's not going to be that way. So what are we going to do? And I'm saying let's manage the future. Let's manage the process. Do we want a big Navy? No. Maybe we do a joint venture with Americans. That's a loss of sovereignty as far as I'm concerned, right there. As Jack Granatstein says, as the opening quote in one of my chapters, I'm a Canadian nationalist, but if you can't defend yourself, you're not really sovereign.
Do you see that existential crisis as she has described it?
No. And much as I've admired Diane and her work over the years, her thesis is one that Canadians should reject.
How come?
Well, somebody said each generation is a trustee for two generations, the past and the future. And of the two, the more important is the past. Because the past is what gave you what you have. And that's what you're going to pass on if you're doing a good job. And it's the line in the Thornton Wilder play. Moses comes out on the stage and he holds up a globe. And he said, with this globe, I control the past. That's more important than controlling the future. And that's the key, which is to control the past, because then you're explaining to people what it is we had, what's there, what it is we have to protect. That comes from the past. So what no generation should do, least of all a generation that's celebrating 200th anniversary of being at war with these people, is do something which becomes irreversible. Okay?
What do you got in mind?
And, well, union with the USA, if that's what she's pitching, the answer is no, because once you've done it, it's over. And as much as I enjoy living in Chicago, what I'm upfront against is the fact that, sadly, the election of Barack Obama, which was going to bring Americans together on the great challenge of the country, has made it worse. Because what's happened is the whole race question has been politicized in a way it wasn't before, and it's much more toxic.
Okay, hold off on that, because we're going to get to the politics. But first I want to unpack a bit of what Diane Francis had to say. One of the reasons she's pro, if not an outright merger, then at least some kind of European Union-style confederation with the United States, is that she sees billions and billions of potential resource development in the North that she believes we'll never get to unless we get into some kind of formal confederated partnership with the United States. Is she right about that?
The resources have been there for millions of years. It's only somebody who owns stock in a company where they've got a lease that's going to expire in 20 years who can say if we don't do it now, it's lost. No. That's one of the advantages of resources, is that if you look after them, they're still there. So she's absolutely right that it's difficult to develop them now because, frankly, of American interference and American NGOs attacking the oil sands and any kind of resource development. And the sheer challenge of going north like that. But the answer is Canadians can do it. And the real political negotiation should be done within Canada. Maybe the Supreme Court should review that decision that they did, in which they assigned millions of square miles in effective ownership to people who were there before the white man arrived. That's the only place on earth where that's been done.
I think Diane's position is you snooze, you lose here. And we're not moving fast enough. And there are other countries who are in the neighborhood who will move faster and take advantage, and we'll be late to the party unless we somehow confederate with the Americans to get something done. You don't see that?
Putin is, although he's now been voted by Forbes as the most powerful man in the world, displacing Obama. But he's got demographic problems worse than almost any other country on earth, because he has men dying by the age of 60 because of alcoholism. That's unique to the... And he's got to defend a country with 10 time zones, where he's got China on the one hand and the European Union on the other. And he's got resources, yes, but what he doesn't have is an ability to certainly take over control of the polar region. No, that's just looking at a map and drawing the wrong conclusion.
Okay, Diane Francis also says that if Canada and the United States got together, again, pick your option. She laid out a bunch of them in the book, but pick whichever one you like. The new entity would be an unrivaled energy superpower in the world. Do you see that?
Yes, but so what? What any resource is what it does for your citizens. Initially, is meeting their needs, and beyond that, how it balances the economic needs of the whole country. And developing resources too fast creates capital strains within the country, and also what you get is what's happened in the mining industry in the past. When you had a mining boom and a camp opened and a huge new supply came out, and then you had a downturn, a lot of companies went bust. So I don't believe, it's not as if the resources go away. That's the beautiful thing about it.
But they become more or less valuable depending on what else is going on in the world, don't they?
The total reserves of oil and gas in the world are about 125 years, and that includes the fracked oil. So that isn't even half the lifespan of Canada. And at that point, if they haven't been developed in Canada, they're going to be worth a lot more than they are today.
Okay, moving on. You're, as we know, perched in Chicago, so you have a view on the United States economy that would certainly be better than most of us who are living up here in Canada and very focused on what's going on here. So tell us, every time we seem to get an economic update from the States, it's not great. I mean, it's not horrible, but it sure is sluggish. How come 5 years after the Great Recession, it's still so sluggish?
I believe that it's primarily because of the zero interest rate policy. And it had to be done because of the banking crash, which was an unnecessary crash, but it had to be done. And what that does, and with the fact that interest rates are still where they were in the midst of the crash, I had the luck 3 years ago to be speaking with David Dodge to an audience in Denver, and he talked then about the need to go back to normal interest rates as soon as possible.
He was not the governor of the bank anymore.
He retired as governor.
He retired as governor of the Bank of Canada.
He was a citizen, David Dodge.
Okay.
And so I suddenly got a thought, and I got up and I said, my father did more battlefield anesthetics in World War II than any other Canadian doctor. And when he was talking about it afterwards to me, he said, with the severely wounded, what they got was heroin. And he said, it didn't take a genius to give them the heroin. He said the skill came in taking them off the heroin while they were still experiencing pain, but putting them on morphine or another analgesic. Because if you left them on the heroin, they were destroyed as human beings.
So zero interest rates equals heroin?
That's financial heroin. Capitalism is a system which the brains of the system are entrepreneurs and risk-taking corporations. The bloodstream is capital. And if you keep pouring financial heroin into that bloodstream, what you do is you prevent the brains from doing what they were set out to do, which is assume risk. In fact, what's happened to the S&P 500, what's the defining stock of our time since the year 2000? The most exciting stock, Apple, all right? Apple has had some new hit every year. This year it had a really great new hit. It brought out a bond. They didn't bring out a new product, they bought out a bond. What did they do with the bond? They used it to buy back stock and to pay dividends. They didn't devote one dime into developing something. The year before, IBM came out with a bond issue for 3 years, 1%. Nothing went into development. All went into stock buybacks, which enrich insiders, widening the gulf between the insiders and the rest of the populace. No economic development. What we're doing is draining the risk device out of the system as a result of the zero interest rate policy. And capitalism the whole funding scheme of pension plans is what's called the capital asset pricing model, where you take the risk-free, which is government bonds, and then each asset class, what you take from that is the expected rate of return based on 10 years, and how much of that you're prepared to put in the fund, knowing the risks and volatility you have. Well, right now, for example, junk bonds in the United States are yielding less than Treasury bonds yielded 9 years ago. I mean, and the risk of those bonds is enormous. People are desperate for yield. So what's happening is the basic pricing mechanism of capitalism. Capitalism has to be able to allocate capital according to risk. That's not being done. And businesses, capital spending as a percentage of GDP keeps declining in a recovery. It's never happened before. And the reason for that is because you've got also corporate raiders like Carl Icahn who attack companies. You should be giving more money back to the stockholders. So all of this is about give it to me now because I don't believe in the future anymore because we've just come through a crash like that. So we have the S&P trading at these astronomical levels, really, which aren't justifiable because only if we get back to a normal rate of growth would that multiple of 18 on the S&P make sense. And so I believe that what we're doing is systematically emasculating capitalism by the zero interest rate policies. And so it's that financial heroin. We needed it back then, just as the soldier did. They would have died otherwise.
But not anymore.
But you don't keep pumping heroin into a wounded soldier.
Let me give you use your drug metaphor. I'll give you a different one. I guess there's lots of people who are concerned that if we got the patient off heroin, the next thing would be that they'd get hooked on crack, because if interest rates go up too much, then we've got a drug problem of a different kind. Is that not fair to say?
A good pun, but it's not. The crack isn't being administered as an emergency analgesic. That is just a bad decision made by somebody who's using it. If interest rates go up, you automatically sort out who are the people who can use the capital most effectively. Just think of the economic growth that we had in Canada at a period of time when interest rates were much higher than they are today. And in the US, similarly the same thing. Similar even in Europe. What's happening here is, it goes, if you think of that section of the Odyssey when they land in the land of the lotus eaters, the sailors go off and they're eating the lotus, and it's so lovely and so peaceful. We don't want to go back out and taking those risks on the wine dark sea. So he has to grab them, strap them to boards to get them out there to assume risk again. What we've got is the equivalent of this. And capitalism, see, socialism is fine with that because everything's being allocated by bureaucrats anyway, so they don't need to have a risk and reward ratio. Capitalism, on the other hand, this is something we've never had. This challenge to capitalism has never occurred before, which is gigantic amounts of money, but they aren't being allocated on the basis of risk and reward. And so, therefore, if we want to go over and become a modified Russia, then fine. But it hasn't really worked well for them either, having that kind of system. If you drain away the vital juices of capitalism, then don't expect the risks to be taken, which are going to create the jobs.
You are in some kind of trippy philosophical mood today for a guy in a pinstripe suit. You know that, eh? Boy, these stories are pretty cool. Janet Yellen's going to be the next chair of the Fed. Do you think she agrees with you?
No, but I think actually she would be sympathetic because she would also have seen enough of history. By the way, she's the right choice. I mean, a choice between Larry Summers and Janet Yellen, that's easy. Larry Summers has an ego even bigger than Obama's, and both of them think they're the smartest men in the room. But in his case, it's toxic. And the Fed needs collegiality, which is the new thing that Bernanke brought in. Greenspan ran it with obfuscation. Bernanke he needed collegiality because he was getting the Fed to do things the Fed had never done before. And he was getting bankers who were cautious about this to go along with it. She can continue the collegiality, but she was the smartest person in the room. Her forecasting record, as certified by the Wall Street Journal, was the best of any of the governors. She is the winner in a landslide. And I have enough respect for her that I think she will begin to detect these things. Now, she's left-wing compared to me and other people, but I think she's going to say, at some point, we've got to start getting back to risk and reward.
Okay, a few minutes left here. Let's talk some politics. U.S., as we know, famously dysfunctional right now, as it has been for quite some time. We're having our own problems here, though, you know. I mean, our Senate is a bit of a dog's breakfast right now as well, and we've got some well-publicized political problems at the biggest city in the country right now, in the mayor's office. And anyway, I don't have to go through the whole litany. Who's more screwed up right now, Canada or the United States?
Easy, the United States. Because Canada, those are sideshows. The Senate has never been important. It's like the House of Lords, as the song goes from Iolanthe. When Wellington thrashed Bonaparte in good King George's time, the House of Lords throughout the war did nothing in particular and did it very well. So don't worry about the Senate. I mean, it's at best a bit of a nuisance and a tradition which perhaps can be abolished. As for the problems of the mayor, they will be solved by replacing him. But what you've got in Washington is serious problems, corrosive problems. And the most recent thing where have abolished the filibuster rule in the Senate. Canadians is a silly rule, but it's been there and it's survived because it protects the minority. They are being very stupid about this because midterm elections are coming up and the Republicans might well get control of the Senate again, in which case they're going to stick it to them. I've lived in the United States since 1984, and so what I've seen is their politics there. I went down there, one of the reasons I went down there was I wanted to live in the land of Reagan, because I saw he was the most important political figure in the world, except for Margaret Thatcher, and I couldn't go to Britain. So what now you see is a situation where they've broken off really dealing with each other on a basis of comedy. And it's not even become comedy now. I mean, okay, the website of the thing, that's good for late night comics. What's more important?
The Obamacare thing. Yeah.
Yes, the Obamacare thing was just preposterous. Yeah. So the problem people didn't realize with Obama is he was a backbench member of the Illinois Senate. He made one great speech with a teleprompter at the convention, and he beat Hillary Clinton, who had years of experience. He had never run anything bigger than his own political office. And suddenly he'd have to run the world. Why should we have expected the man to live up to this? He was deified without having proved the paternity. So what's happened now is his luck has ended and things are going wrong and on foreign policy and domestic policy. And that means the Democratic Party, which is the natural ruling party there, is now being riven by problems. And the Republican Party, as a result of blundering as they did about shutting down things, I think Speaker Boehner has now got power back. So therefore, I think the Republicans, look, it was only 6 weeks ago when the Republicans had a 19% standing in the polls and Obama had a 57% standing. Today, it's 39 for Obama. Now that's sad, because he's got to do big things negotiating abroad, and everybody sees he's a weakling. So the United States has much more serious problems. Stephen Harper compared to Obama, Stephen Harper is a great man compared to Obama, not because he's good with the public, but he's good at getting things done. He has a national vision, and he's sort of above the ordinary things of politics.
Except for senatorial expense accounts.
Exactly, because those are details.
Right. Gotcha.
And staff is supposed to take care of those problems. And to focus on those kinds of things is important. He's pulled off a trade deal with Europe. That was something Trudeau wanted to do. And they talked about it and never did it. For 2 years, he worked quietly behind the scenes, and he did the brilliant thing of getting the provinces this time on side, where in the past, whenever they did it, it would immediately be vetoed by one province or another. They all rushed to be at the head of the line. Yeah. He pulled that off, and I was amazed reading the Canadian press that that was a page 3 story, and instead, on page 1 was the Senate. Preposterous.
Now you know what sells papers. I look forward to the next economic advisor that we interview who will be able to quote Iolanthe, Thoreau, and Odysseus. That wasn't bad. Don Coxe, Chairman, Coxe Advisors, LLP. Thanks for coming into TVO
Pleasure.
tonight.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.